Hello, beautiful children. It's Mrs. Day, and today is the last poem in our 5 golden poems series. Okay, I'm really sorry. That's the last time you have to hear me do that, though. The last poem in our series. We've studied villanelles. We learned that they have 5 tercets and then a quatrain and a very specific pattern of rhyme and refrain. We studied haikus. We learned that not only are they 3 lines and have 17 syllables total, but also that they feature juxtaposition and strong imagery. We studied sonnets, and specifically the Shakespearean sonnet, learning that it has 14 lines. It has A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G rhyme scheme and a couplet at the end. We learned about limericks. And today, our very last poem in the series is Blackout. Blackout poetry. Blackout poetry is great. It's fun. And you don't exactly write it. You don't exactly write blackout poetry. You more sort of... let me show you. Blackout poetry, according to this definition from arapahoelibraries.org, blackout poetry is when you take a written piece of text from a book, newspaper, or magazine and redact, what? Redact, to edit or remove text or information. You'll often hear this when you hear about like sensitive or classified documents being released to the public, but pieces of it are like blacked out so you can't see pieces of it. It's called redacting. It just means editing or taking out or, removing. So blackout poetry is when you take a piece of written text from a book, newspaper, or magazine and redact words in order to come up with your very own free verse poem. Free verse, I'm sure you will recall, is poetry that does not have a pattern of rhythm or a pattern of rhyme. By the way, free verse poetry can have rhyme in it. It just doesn't have a pattern of rhyme or meter or rhythm or anything like that, like some of our traditional forms have. Let me show you an example of blackout poetry. This is actually from a local poet, Avni Vyas, and I'm not actually going to, I actually will read it for you. Okay. I ask, will I get handsome? He said, people get along just fine. I want to have fave man's turns. I want to leave in tears. I'm disappointing. My words feel tragic. All of this to block out that missing, unspeakable child. It's poetic. And what she did was she took a long chunk of text and she blacked out the parts that weren't her poem. This reminds me of, I could get the quotation wrong here, but I think Michelangelo talks about having a hunk of marble, and what you do is you chip away everything that isn't your statue. That's exactly what you do with blackout poetry. Now, you don't always have to literally black it out. You could paint it out and have left a poem. Look at that. Aren't those lovely? You guys know why I liked this one? She took a big chunk of text and she painted over everything that wasn't her poem. Now, I want to be really clear. When I read that first one to my students today in class, a lot of them thought that it just sounded like random words. It's not. Blackout poetry is not just random words. It's still poetry. Why is it poetry? Because it's communicating meaning through strong imagery and carefully selected word choice. When you make your blackout poetry, you are going to look for words that are beautiful, words that have imagery, strong mental pictures for your reader, and words that use poetic sound devices, alliteration, assonance, consonants, repetition, and rhyme to create your poem. Now, because I do every assignment that my students do, here is what I did to create my blackout poetry. I love sharks, so I Googled sharks. And what I found was this article. Actually, it took me a bit longer. There was a longer video. I found this article, and look at the beginning of it. As the sea churned all around us, we leaned over the edge of the boat to get a better look. Dozens of dorsal fins cruised here and there, somewhat menacing half-moon tails thrashed about, and, now and then, a colossal gaping mouth breached the water surface. As soon as I read that, I knew, ooh, this is going to make me a nice poem. Why? Because I had some imagery, the sea churning, half-moon tails thrashing about, and I even had some alliteration, dozens of dorsal fins. And as I kept reading, I saw that I had more poetic elements, and so that was what I was going to use to create my Blackout poem, which ended up looking like this. I took this text and I looked for three things. I looked for words and phrases that I found beautiful. I highlighted them in yellow. I looked for powerful imagery, nothing but turquoise, specks of light weaving and glinting on a rippling sea, the sea churned. And I looked for sound devices like dozens of dorsal fins and warm waters. You can also create that in your blacking out, but I found it and it was already there. So then I used a literal highlight tool. I highlighted everything that wasn't those bits of poetry in black highlight, and then I saw what I had left, and I deleted a little bit more until it was what I wanted. I put some like black dark water behind it and a shark silhouette, and that is my Blackout poem. Blackout poetry is really, really cool because it's a little bit like found art. Creating art out of things that you find. You are creating poetry out of words that are already there, words that someone else wrote. You are just finding the poetry in them. We are going to write one of these. Let's get started.